Now, from a big fly to a small fly. That's his suspender buzzer. The idea of a piece of foam inside, or making a fly float in a similar way, probably came from America. Charles Brooks was probably the first to come up with this idea of having a ball of something on the top. But he only used one of the floating polypropylene, rub some up into a little ball and put it in there. And it never really worked well. And it all went quiet for a while. And then when John was thinking about how he could make a buzzer float, Neil Patterson, I don't think a lot of you know Neil Patterson, he wrote Chalkstream Chronicles, he came up with this idea of putting a piece of foam inside a net. And originally they used the little balls of when you pulled a jiffy bag apart, in between the two there was polystyrene balls. But they were really too fragile, because as soon as the fish got it, it chomped it and flattened it, and that was it. So now you use either Plastosoap or a closed cell foam. You need a closed cell foam. It was called a suspender buzzer because it's put in ladies' nylons. so this was the best material for putting the piece of foam in. And you can tell I've tied a lot of these because, I mean, this is one of my sheets of foam. So, and how do I get those? How do I get the piece of foam out? I use a car aerial. Okay. If you get a car aerial, you see, and sharpen all the ends, you've then got 4 different sizes of foam you can cut. All you do is you want a piece of cardboard for cutting it on, and you need a drinking straw. I'll show you what that's for in a minute. All you do is you've sharpened one end. Press that down on there, then you've got your piece of foam stuck in the end, and when you press it, hey presto, out comes a ball of foam. So that's how you cut it, and you can get 4 different sizes for nothing if you can find an old aerial. This buzzer, John used on the rivers a lot. I mean, originally he tied it for still water, but in bigger sizes. And then John was really an authority on chironomids. And so there was no patterns available then for buzzers. Nobody tied one that looked like we know now today as a buzzer. So John set about what he could tie, and this was what he ended up with. And this was what it was used for, but he would use it in larger sizes than this. John's thing about fly tying was that if he had to tie more than 6, he came and asked me to tie them. He soon got bored of tying one pattern. So anything over 6 I had to tie for him. And I must have tied dozens and dozens of those for various people. If you went to any chalk stream and asked a man to open his fly box, how many buzzers would you see in their fly box? Probably none, would you? You'd be lucky if you found one. But they're such a prolific part. If you think they're smutting, very often they're taking buzzers. But the only downside thing is that whereas in a still water you might get one up to 12, 15 millimetres long, you're lucky in a river if you can find a buzzer that's 3 millimetres long. You've got to fish very small for them in the river. Sometimes if he thinks it's going to be windy weather or whether he's fishing a lake, he'll go to something like this, which has got a hackle under the bead, under the piece of foam. So that if you were fishing with still water, you'd probably go from 16s to 14s, something like that. But on the rivers, he always used an 18. Right, I'm changing my thread because I'm going to 8-0 this, because I've gone down in fly size. Now I'm using some 8-0 thread. This is just Uni 8-0. The first thing to do is, what I tend to do is just put a little bit of varnish on the hook where you're going to put our thread initially, because we don't want this to slip around. As we tighten it, we want the bead to stop on the top. We don't want it slipping around. So this will make sure that the thread isn't going to slip when we put some tension on it. So just put a bed on of where we're going to put the bead, put our foam. take the piece of stock in, because that's where the suspender comes from. Now, how would you pick that up? The piece of foam. Stick your on the end of your dubbing needle, like that. Put it on the thing, and there we are. That's all ready to tie in. Then we don't want to tie it. We want a little bit of room at the eye to make our whip finish. We don't want to go too close to the eye. Make sure when you've tied it in, you can push it along a bit, but leave a good gap at the front where we're going to tie off. So there we've then trim all that off. There we go. Keep your scissors sharp. I'll always use one of these for keeping the scissors sharp. It's just a flat hook stone. Oops. Oh, everybody can see that. There we go. Just a flat hook stone, and then that keeps my scissors sharp. Every so often, every couple of months or so, I sharpen them, but always make sure that the points are the same length. Hold them up, they must be the same length. Don't have one point longer than the other, or your scissors will never work properly. So keep them sharp and keep the tension on. I mean, I wore the screw out. That's not the original screw in these scissors. I mean, these tools will last you a lifetime. You know, you don't have... That was a special offer in trout and salmon probably 20 years ago, these were, £2.50. And by continually sharpening them, and it wasn't a fishing company that was selling them, it was like, I don't know, surgical supplier or something, and they were selling them for £2.50, and I had those and the flat ones. I rarely use the flat ones these days, I always use curved scissors. But now, if you keep them sharp, they'll last forever. So there we go. Right, now we want to put a little piece of white tuft in for the tail, and we put that in now. And what we do, this is just ordinary white floss. It's fluorescent white floss. And what we do is, to stop it coming out, don't try putting two butt ends in together, because they'll pull out. Fold it in half over your thread. Run it down to the body, and then bind it over. Now you know, go round the bend a bit there. Now you know that'll never pull out. Just cut that off to length. And there we are, we've put with our floss tail in. And the rib, we use some flat silver, because as you remember, this is for fishing up near the surface, where the buzzer will have a lot of gas in its body, because it's used the gas to make it float up to the top. And I've found out inadvertently why they look silver, because sometimes I do flies with glass beads, clear glass beads. I put some like red thread on and then put a glass bead on the top. But if you don't fill up the gap between the bead and the red, you don't see the red underneath. You have to put some varnish so it's wet when it goes on and it fills that gap up. If it's an air gap, you don't see the colour that's under the bead. So that's what's happened. This air is in the buzzer, and it just all looks silver. When they're up the top, they're nearly all silver with just a fine rib in between of a colour. So what we use, John called for antron, this is just ordinary antron, what you've got on antron wool, I think it's called. But what you'll find is that as it comes off the card when you buy some, it'll be too thick for what we want for size 18. So just run your dubbing needle through it, split it down, and then take as much off as you want just to make the body. And before you do anything else, put a knot in the end so it doesn't all fray when you're working it. So when you're working it, and then you can cut it off. And out of that piece, that could be split down again for another couple there. Just make sure all the ends are together there. Again, fold it over so that before you tie it in, so it's never going to come out. Just pull it to the length you want, there. Just bind all that down, go round and round the corner a little bit, and there. This is going to make our body. With this, because
What colour is that, John? What colour is that?
It's olive colour.
Olive.
Yeah, olive this is. And because I've used olive thread to match the body we're doing. And because this is straight fibre, the first thing you do before you turn is just twist it so that you actually stop that riding down, the flat riding away. So if you put a twist in first, I've gone over the point I think there. Let me just get that one out of the way. Put a twist in, and there we go. And then you can come up, just slightly overlap each time the last one you've put on, the last turn you put on, and build that up to there and tie in. You can tie it, I always tie either side of underneath the foam bead, just again turn that off. Only over open your scissors, the minimum amount you need to cut. Don't come up like this with your scissors, just the merest amount you need to cut. And then wind that in quite close turns, so there's quite a bit of silver showing. Again, just bind that off. There we go. And now all we put in, for a thorax, all we put in is some cock pheasant. Just take a few fibres, not too many, so half a dozen will do us. Pull them off. And again, make sure the ends are together. Just tie them on the side. There we go. And this is where we come onto the front. I said we need to leave a little bit of space at the front because we're going to tie off in front of the bee. Now again, when you put that, twist it before you do it so that it keeps together. A couple of turns there. Come underneath and tie off. Just pull that foam back. Again, put a whip finish on there now in front of that foam. And there we've got our buzzer. Does it look like a buzzer? Oh, that's right, yeah.